So we have now we are done with the elaboration of the terms of reference. So as I mentioned before, I'm not going to give you lots of insight about writing of the proposals because it's mainly your job. But still, I thought it could be interesting to give you a few tips. So usually in most of the grant providers, the proposal is composed of three parts. The project description, which is, let's say, the scientific, the administrative thing plus the scientific description. The Gantt chart, which is the overall view of the project, and the budget. All of them are equally important. You must spend some time on the budget and the Gantt chart. The most important thing to know is that a research project needs to be coherent. For example, me, when I look at the research projects, I screen them because imagine you have 15 projects to evaluate. You won't read them 15 pages each. You won't read them one by one. So first thing I want is to understand what the researcher wants to do. So me, personally, I read the abstract, then I look at the Gantt, and I look at the budget. If by looking at the three elements, I do not understand the project, it's going to be complicated for it because really the project is well written just by reading the abstract, the Gantt, and the budget. You should perfectly understand what the researcher wants to do, even before to go deeply inside. So, about writing of the proposal. As mentioned before, it's your job to do it properly, but a few tips. Four main advices. The first one is do your homework. If you address a specific research project, your bibliography needs to be up to date. The bad news is I'm completely unable to tell you how to do that, but the good news is, and you have a webinar on the 27th of February, or a PFP webinar by Calogero Schilacci of GRC, which will allow you to have proper techniques, to have a really good bibliography that you will be able to put in your research proposal. The second advice is that you really need to be clear. Your proposal must be understandable by a non-specialist. Say, have it proofreaded by a friend, your wife, your husband, your neighbor. But yeah, if it's too complicated, not clear, it's not good. Yeah, obviously have a proper language level. And here I'm talking to my Francophone friends. If you apply, for example, all our call for proposals are in English because lots of the evaluators are non-French speakers. So if you are not a native speaker, get some help, find a friend from OPFP and have your project proofreaded before to submit it. And one very simple tip, but very important, avoid sentences longer than 3 lines. If your sentences is longer than 3 lines, you will lose the person in front of you. So put a point and start a new sentence. Because what you should keep in mind that sometimes evaluators have 15 to 20 projects to review. So imagine if it's 13 projects you review, the writing is unclear, the language level is rather weak. So really the evaluator will start with a bad impression about your proposal, even though the science is good. So yeah, really, it's a kind of respect the evaluator, have clear languages, not too long sentences, and proper language level. By be clear, I mean avoid vague sentences, because we often see in research proposals sentences like some experiments are going to be made. Okay, fair enough, but no. What we want to see, we will have a field trial of X plants repeated Y times. We will sequence their genes, or we will do surveys with farmers. So we will select 5 areas applying those conditions, and then we will survey 15 farmers in each area. And the same way, the system of coherence is that if you have clear description of your experiments, it will allow you to have a clear budget description of your experiments. For example, you say, we will sequence Z genes, 10 genes. So one gene sequencing costs $100. So the sequencing price of the whole project is $1,000. So what that I mean, be really specific, because being clear when you are writing research project is being specific. Also, another advice is always keep in mind that research is a tricky business. And yeah, allow yourself to have different scenarios in your project. For example, and for here, I'm mostly talking about really exploratory projects, when often the project is really dependent on the results of the first work package. But you have some researchers say, yeah, it should work so we can run the whole project. And you have other person who will write the same proposal, but say, okay, depending on the results of the first work package, we may adapt the rest of the project to reach different objectives. So really, it's completely possible, and it's always appreciated by the evaluators. So now we come back to a little boring but important part, the Gantt chart. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with that, but yeah, it's a project management tool assisting in the planning and scheduling of projects of all sizes. And they are very interesting because they are useful for visualization. So usually you've got work packages, and under each work package, you have tasks. And it's also the most common tool used to assess the feasibility of the project. And yeah, feasibility is important because researchers have a tendency to be ambitious and try put lots of things in the project to say that, oh, if you give me money, I'm going to do all of that. But evaluators know research, and they know how long it takes to do that or this or that. So a good research project is feasible. If it's over ambitious, usually the evaluator will think that the researcher is not conscious of the work is going to underdone. So yeah, really use the Gantt chart as a tool to manage the feasibility of your project. For example, here, sorry about the size, but here you can see a really well-written Gantt chart when you can see work package 1, work package 2, work package 3 with the month, and for each work package with clear milestones and deliverables. Then also for big project or even for small project, a work package dedicated to management and coordination is often really appreciated. You can put, for example, in my project, every month we will have a meeting. So do not hesitate. Usually you name it work package 0, and you can put all the different meetings that you plan. And if you have, for example, a closing seminar or a kickstart, you can put all of them. So do not hesitate to put the management in your Gantt chart. It will show the evaluator that you're conscious that the project needs to be well managed. And as well on the data side, now the management of data has become more and more important. So it's quite good to have a data management plan. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically it's a tool that will allow you to explain how the data generated by your project, where they are going to be stocked, who will be able to access it, all of that. So I won't go too much into details, but if you click on the data management plan here, when you will receive the presentation, will bring you to a website when you have lots of information. And as well, what is also more and more appreciated is a fair use of data. Basically, it means that the data generated by the projects are going to be accessible by anyone. And it's complementary with the data management plan. FAIR means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So depending on what I mentioned before, the philosophy of the call and stuff, it could be really a good point to have a data management plan. Here it's here in Work Package 4.3, and a fair use of data could be appreciated. Then here it's a well-designed list of milestones, but you see that it's very precise. The researcher really sometimes to really explain what is going to be done. Same thing for the deliverables. So I won't go into details, but you see the deliverables, sorry, are really specific. As I mentioned before, it's really clear what they are expected. And then another tip, in the Gantt chart, it's sometimes good to have the human resources. Because usually, for example, here you see you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 internships. And usually they are a bit drawn in the project description, so you don't know exactly what they are. So here it's good to have, okay, now we know that we're going to have one internship at LISA in 2022, one at PSH, and with the corresponding work package. And you could even sometimes have it, have your Gantt chart at the beginning with all your activities and have another one under it with the same thing for the human resources. Then the last part about writing the proposal, the budget. Yeah, so commonly budgets have two parts. The requested funding, which is what you're going to ask to the grant provider, and the other sources of funding, which are usually the salaries, if you have another fundings from another project, if your institution is providing some money or some platforms whatsoever. And usually researchers have the tendency to neglect the other sources of funding. But they're really important because it will show the grant provider that is not alone in a way that this project is really inside a whole environment. For example, if you mention the implication of a collaborator from another institution, we want his salary to appear in the other sources of funding. If you work with, going back to the Senegalese and Nigeria, the Nigeria Workers project, I'm going to work with my colleague in Senegal, and he's going to spend 3 months on the project. So in the other sources of funding, I want to see the 3 months of the salary of the Senegalese colleague. So yeah, now 2 little tips. This one could seem really trivial, but it's not. Budgets are normally under Excel formats with automated formulas. Be really careful if you add some lines that the formulas are still correct. It could seem very, very simple, but you wouldn't imagine the number of incorrect budgets that I have seen just because people had inserted lines or columns and basically they messed with all the automatic formulas. And then if you have any doubts, do not hesitate to contact your financial services. It's usually their job to help you doing that. So yeah, go for it. And yeah, last take-home message. In 99% of the call for proposal, you will find a contact email address. And really, if you have any question or any interrogation, do not hesitate to contact it. It's usually well appreciated to have a researcher trying to write the best project as possible. I remember in some committees, some projects being really, really close, and one of the elements that could be taken into account is, oh yeah, the person contacted us and is really asking some question. It seems really motivated to have this grant. It seems very important for him or her. So yeah, really do not hesitate to contact the email address. Yeah, a little bonus. I won't go too much on this, but you will see that EU funded and lots of development projects, research and development projects, often requires a log frame. A log frame is another name for logical framework, which is basically, to keep it simple, a table. We will insert your project in its environment with the goals, the outputs, the outcome, and the overall impact of the project, and allow you to elaborate a list of indicators to monitor the success of your project, the success of your project. So once again, I won't go too much into detail here, but if you click on the blue link, it will bring you to a website where you will have all the information. So we are reaching the end of today's webinar, with I think the thing that you are interested by is how we run a selection process, in that case today at AGROPOLIS Foundation. So well, I know that in most institutions, each project is evaluated by at least 2 reviewers. And as for big projects, we can go up to 4. Then the projects are ranked by grades: AA, AB, BB, AC, or if you have 4 evaluators, AAAB, BBBBB, all that. Then, depending on the available envelope and the number of projects you have, as the common rule, and the Science Council discuss all the projects with at least 1A. One very important thing is that the 2 evaluators are not always specialists of the scientific field. So again, be clear. Because, as I mentioned before, if your project is well written and coherent, even a non-specialist can see that it's a good project. He won't be able to judge the science, but he can say that it's a good and feasible project. So imagine you have 2 evaluators. One is a specialist. He said, yeah, the science is good, the project is well written. And the other one, he said, I don't know anything about science, but the project is well written. It's going to be a AA. And so you have much more chance to be selected. A little tip, if available, look at the projects selected during previous wave or previous call. Usually they are available online. For 2 things, to see a bit what are the type of project they select, and also to see that if they have already funded a project really close to yours, because normally if a project really close to yours has already been funded the year before, it's not really a good sign for your project. Yeah, then each evaluator has its particularities. Some will look deeply in the bibliography, other will really study the budget or the Gantt chart. Some will pay deep attention to the scientific description. So always keep in mind, once again, that both science is necessary but not sufficient to be selected. You really need to be careful on all the elements of your submission. Then some grant providers, as we, provide recommendations after selection, even if the project is not selected. So it can be good to identify the type of funders so that you can write your project and have a feedback on it. I know that not all grant providers do that, but some of them do. So if you identify some of them who do it, it's good because you can have feedback on your project and elements to improve your project. So, yeah, as you see, you have many evaluation criteria. But what you see is obviously at the beginning, you have the scientific quality. As I mentioned, if you don't have good science, it won't work. But as I mentioned, it's not my job to teach you how to do good science. But yeah, you go, as you see, the budget, The partnership we didn't mention. So yeah, before to write the project, in the same way that you check the eligibility and the finance, look closely at the evaluation criteria and think, oh, how could I adapt my project to be in line with most of these elements? Obviously, sometimes you won't be fulfilling all of them. For example, international partnership. If your project is national, you won't have any international partnership. Yeah, and obviously, once I didn't cite, but which is really important for some of the evaluators, is gender balance. Yeah, it's more and more taken into account by evaluators. So to finish, I'm gonna show you here. I'm gonna show you a few examples of recommendations that we gave to projects. So we're gonna start with a selected projects, and then we're gonna go on with rejected projects. Just to give you illustration of what I've told you today. So I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to read that. Yeah, actually, the first paragraph is basically a summary of what I've told you today, is also what you want to see when your project is reviewed. Project is clear, good scientific quality, portable, coherent, well written, good Gantt chart, and yeah, same for the second one. Good methodology, innovative. Then we're gonna move here. A bit of time to read. Yeah, so you see once again here that all of the elements are evaluated. The Gantt chart, the budget, you can see the last sentences. The budget sheet is very detailed and testifies to well thought out planning, which brings you back to what I was telling you at the beginning of today's webinar, that me, when I look at a research project, I look at abstract, Gantt, budget. If your project is well designed, just by looking at that, we should understand what you want to do. And now we will finish with 2 slides about what you don't want. Yeah, so actually it's a bit the contrary of the previous slides, but it's also a summary of what I was telling you. You see, yeah, here you go, a weak description of the studies, a budget, not enough details, detailed description of design is sometimes missing. The proposal lacks awareness of prior art in this research area. So once again, try to attend Calogero webinar. And yeah, here again. Yeah, so here basically you can see that the researcher did not do his homework, that his methodology is not well written, and that that the project is not clear enough. So, final take-home message for today. What I would like to understand is that science, budget, and planning are really linked together. And before to start to write the full description of your project, try to work on the three of them. Write a summary. Okay, scientifically, I want to do that. Then how I am going to do that, it will be the planning and the Gantt chart. And the planning and the Gantt chart will give you your budget. And when your budget respects is clear, then you can undergo and write really detail everything. And I hope that if you do that, it will improve your success ratio. And yeah, as a final word, I wish you all a lots of success in your next project submission. Thank you very much.